Autism Society of Northwest Ohio has been in existence since 1968. We're one of the older chapters. Our national organization dates to 1965. The organization was the largest, was the first and the largest grassroots autism organization starting in 1965. The history of autism, in the 40s and 50s, when it was identified, parents were blamed for their child's autism. It was based on a made-up theory from some guy who really wasn't even a psychologist. They said that autism was caused by the mother's rejection of the child while it was in the womb. The treatment was to take the child out of the home and psychoanalyze the mother. And so back then, there were parents that said, you know what, this isn't right. I have other kids and they're fine. There have to be more services and supports. We can't just forget about these kids and put them away. And so that's kind of how the Autism Society formed. There were some parents who met across the country, and then different chapters formed. My chief thing is to answer the phones, talk to families, help them on their journey, help them connect with resources, give them information. But I also run educational programs. We have a summer school program, so I administer that. I don't teach in it, but I hire all the staff. We've created some other programs like our SIB shop for brothers and sisters. We have an adult social group that's run by parent volunteers, but we kind of administer that as well. I have had calls, screening calls. Somebody's concerned, my grandchild, I think they're showing signs of autism. So I can go through, there's a tool called the MChat, and now it's online. So I can go through that with them, or I can go through the CDC milestone signs. There's a checker online, and talk to them about, you know, what makes them think their child is autism, what are they showing. 99% of the time, they have some very, very legitimate concerns. And I always am going to refer them on. I can screen, I can't diagnose. So I'm always going to refer them on to a developmental pediatrician or a psychologist or somebody who can diagnose that's appropriate for their age. The diagnosis is based on observation of behavior and a developmental history. So there are some gold standard tools that are used for that. One is called the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. So that is observation of the behavior. There are modules depending on how old the individual is and whether or not they're verbal. And there are certain activities that the trained practitioner will do with the individual and score them based on their responses compared to other people who have been diagnosed with autism. So they might, for a young child, take a novel toy that is like a battery-powered hopping toy, right? And show them that toy and kind of score their response. So to see if the child is interested, and do they look to the examiner or the caregiver, if the caregiver's in the room, to go, oh, either this is cool, I want to share that with you, or to say, what is this? Mm-hmm. Or do they have some other response that they turn away or they pick it up and they throw it, that kind of thing. For older individuals, they might give them 5 objects and ask them to tell a story with those objects. So all those things can be scored. Again, they're normed against people who already have autism. Pediatricians have guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics saying that they should be screening specifically for autism twice before age 2, at 18 months and 24 months. Mm-hmm. In one of our counties, Fulton County, they only have 2 pediatricians in the county. Mm-hmm. That means most people are taking their child to probably a family doctor. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's an older practitioner, somebody not keeping up with CMEs or not even keeping up with those other pediatric guidelines, they may not know the signs of autism. They may not be trained. So yeah, there's that kind of thing in awareness and recognition of even the diagnosis. And then there's not really a clear path. When your child has cancer, your doctor is your team leader, your medical leader. He said, this is the tumor, or she. This is the protocol we're going to use, and here's your chance of a good outcome. And you still continue to be the parent, and you just kind of follow the doctor's lead. And hopefully insurance will pay for it or most of it, right? When your child has autism, the doctor might say, okay, well, come back and see me in 6 months. Or they might say something like, go get speech therapy. Or they might say, depending on the doc, they might say, call the Autism Society. But there's no one path for each person because they're all different. We get a lot of referrals from the developmental pediatricians. There are a couple. There's one in Bowling Green. That practice routinely asks me for our brochures and cards. We get space from Harbor, and they have a team of developmental pediatricians and psychologists who evaluate for autism. And they will send people across the hall for either, just to get connected with us or for our services. And, we refer to them as one of the practitioners that can diagnose as well. So we do get referrals from doctors. We get them from schools. We get them from other parents, internet, lots of different resources. So we let them know about our activities, our programs and activities, other things happening in the autism community. There's a lot of people I've known for 15 years, and I might not talk to them a lot, but maybe they check in with me once a year. Or what happens is, at the beginning, when you have a young child, usually there's a lot of work to do, and so I'm in contact with those folks a lot. And then they get into their school or their program, and things kind of level out for them. They connect with their services. And then maybe the end of elementary school, they have some bumps in the road, and they contact us back again. And they say, we're having some behavior issues now. We talk about that. Or my son's going through puberty, and we're having some issues. Do you have any supports and resources for that? And then again, that transition age. It's like, well, what do I do now? So, we see people kind of throughout their lifespan. I mean, there's obviously some people that I talk to once and don't talk to again. There's other people I might talk to every day for a little while, and then later on. But again, we serve the whole lifespan. We have our summer school program is for kids who are involved in public school. And then we have our adult group, and we're involved in some education programs for those transition age youth as well. We have some family events where people can connect with other parents. So we've done, we do picnics or our walk. It's a good chance to talk to other parents who are out there. We've different times of the time that I've been here, we've done different things, with that chance for parents and families to meet up with each other. Autism is a lifespan diagnosis, and our job as an Autism Society, or our mission, is not to cure people with autism, but rather to help them find supports and interventions that work so that they can maximize their quality of life.
Jack is nonverbal, and he does use some sign, and he uses a communication device. He has limited interests. He loves to swim. He is more vocationally task-based, and that's something that we've really tried to focus on in school. And he actually works for things. His reward is to do other work tasks. So he's very task-based, and he likes to be very busy. We do deal with behavior issues, and, sometimes it can be self-injurious behavior. Other times it can be aggressive behavior. I've definitely found that many components of autism are medical, and a lot of those behaviors come when he's not feeling well and can't express it, or there are a lot of medical comorbidities that get missed with kids with autism, because autism seems to just be one lump diagnosis. I would say as a mom, I noticed something wasn't right probably between 3 and 6 months of age, which everybody tells me is really early. But it started with his lack of eye contact, and when he was a baby, I would hold him up and he would look the other way, and I would move him all around, and every time I moved him around to kind of try to make eye contact with him, he would move, look in the other direction. And he had a lot of medical issues. He didn't respond to sounds the way that he should. I know at his 6-month well check, he passed that, and there were really no concerns. So it was somewhere really between 6 and 9 months of age that it kind of got on the doctor's radar as well. They had a team of, they had a social worker, a psychologist. She was a developmental pediatrician. They had a speech therapist and an occupational therapist. And so that was kind of nice, because you had somebody from every area that could kind of give their recommendations. There is, unfortunately, and it's getting better, but there aren't a lot of roadmaps when somebody tells you that your child has autism. I mean, I think I took a day or two. I had personally already known it in my head. So when he got his diagnosis, it was just a formality for me. But, I took a couple of days and mentally dealt with it, and then decided that I needed to pick myself up and figure out how to best help him. And that's kind of what I've done every day since. My daughter has always been very bright and very smart, and Jack is her best friend, and they've always been that way. And when she was younger, and before she could really understand what was going on, to her, he was just her brother, and that was just the way that it was. As she got older and realized that there was something different about him, she's never been embarrassed by him or tried to hide him. I mean, she wants to be a special education teacher. She's a junior in high school now. She's great with him. I mean, they're best friends. She talks to him just like, and he actually is great with her. He listens to her better than he does his own parents. They're great friends. We made contact with the Autism Society. Early intervention through the county is one, because they start working with the child and trying to do different placements, find out what kind of schooling or what kind of therapies. We did, physical therapy. Jack had some physical delays, occupational therapy, speech therapy. So in the beginning when he was little, I mean, that was my whole life, was just running him to therapy, trying to, they do ABA therapy. There was a new program in town that was ABA based. So we spent a lot of time doing that and just trying to get him as far as possible. And that's my goal ultimately. Jack is very delayed in a lot of areas, and my goal is to just push him as far as we can and make him as independent as possible. I always had the knowledge of Bittersweet and what they did there. And when Jack was 12, I filled out all the paperwork to get him put on all the waiting lists. Just, because looking in the future down the road, I don't know where he's going to end up. So, there's our long waiting list for Bittersweet as well. And so, we hadn't had a great experience with his summer program the year before. So I thought trying Bittersweet out would be a good thing, since that's what they do. And it was a positive experience for Jack. I think that he loves the vocational aspect of things, and that's where I see him going in that direction. Honestly, the biggest resource out there that I have found are other parents, because the kids are all so different, and autism can be very isolating, and unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't know how to handle it and what to do. So my biggest resource has just been talking to other parents. I have utilized the Autism Society. The school district has been a great help. It's just really getting to know people by word of mouth, and even on, all over the country now with social media and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I've gotten to know parents that I wouldn't have otherwise known that have kids just like my own. It's very easy to be stuck on a diagnosis, and at the end of the day, the diagnosis doesn't define the child. I mean, Jack and all of the kids that I've met are very, very, very smart. Even if they have limited abilities, they are in there. They understand what you're saying. They know what you're talking about, even if they can't express it. And Jack has a great sense of humor, and there are many times where he laughs appropriately or does funny things, or a lot of times he'll do things to seek attention like other kids. I think that it's just remembering that there really is a person in there, all of the kids with differing abilities.
So I had a child that was meeting all the milestones, the developmental milestones, and it was like this iron curtain just shut down. And I went from a child that was giving me eye contact, making sounds, to literally sitting in a room and just staring and rocking at a spinning object and just making sounds, not communicating, not responding to me. And we were in Louisiana at the time, and I did take him to different psychologists and psychiatrists, and I would run into people saying, well, he's schizophrenic because he has blue eyes and blonde hair. And I would run into these really odd diagnoses. So I finally got him to a psychiatrist who said, okay, we're going to say that he has pervasive developmental disorder, which is a catch-all. It's we don't know how to diagnose him. We're just going to throw him into this diagnosis. But he told me at the worst end of pervasive developmental disorder is autism. So that was the first time I actually heard the word, right around 1997. So at that point, he hadn't even been diagnosed with autism. But I did hook into a children's center where there was a psychiatrist, psychologist, and services. So we hooked in there. Fortunately, there was a teacher in the system who worked on behavioral modification that had some pretty good techniques that I learned from. And we didn't really have a diagnosis of autism at this point. Nobody was going to diagnose. They wanted to wait and see what happened. Ben got his diagnosis at about age 11, which seems later, but he did have the pervasive developmental disorder. And so as far as altering my style of parenting, I spent an awful lot of time pre-explaining things. Ben is the type of person that you want to mitigate anxiety. So if something's going to change, reinforcing, okay, this is going to be different than what we've done before, or something might happen that is different. And it was this constant dialogue of making him aware of when things are different, or trying to teach him that for every action there's a consequence. Not necessarily negative. I mean, you can have positive consequences, to try and get him to recognize making choices. Once you have that word autism, it's easier to start finding services. And when I saw there was an Autism Society of Northwest Ohio, that's immediately who I reached out to when I moved here. I was able to find a doctor, and she also gave me the information that I needed to get in touch with Lucas County Developmental Disabilities, and explained the services and those types of things. And then actually, through the process of dealing with this, when I encountered problems, I would email her, I would call her, and say, this is what I'm encountering. And she would give me the information that I needed, such as, okay, this is what his rights are. They can't tell you to do this. You have a right to choice. You know, so she was kind of a guiding figure for me when we got into the county. There's a variety of services. There are autism societies all over the United States. Once these teenagers are in high school, they can stay until they're about 22, and once they get out, what do you do? And so the system is set up to where they call it natural supports. And natural supports are your parents or your family, and they expect you to take care of them, and they don't want to give the funding for people to go out and be independent. This is where we have a problem. Okay. And so in the state of Ohio, and this is actually nationally, there are waivers. And those waivers provide individuals with funding that help support the services that they need. It doesn't pay necessarily for their housing costs, but it provides for transportation costs, staffing costs, nursing, those types of things. But I'm not the only one facing that. There are stories, countless, across the nation, in Ohio, where parents hear this. When you die, they'll get put somewhere, because right now it's all so limited. So that's one of the avenues that I work for advocacy. The other is advocating for people's rights to education, to services, making sure that they're on waiver systems, making sure that they understand that there's an enhanced 911 that they can utilize, where they have information on your child, whether it be adult or a child, that if they're in emergency, they know there's a child there with autism. This is where their room is. This is how they function, those types of things. This was started by a school teacher from TPS who realized that these people were getting out of school and had nowhere to go. So she actually started Bittersweet Farms. And it is currently an organization that provides rehabilitation and work. And the work opportunities are in their horticulture department, where they have they have all these hoop houses and things like that. They grow organic vegetables, that they have a CSA program, groundskeeping, they have a barn program. My son is in the horticulture department, the CSA, and he works in the culinary kitchen and helping with the pesto, and they make cookies and do other types of things like that. And then he also volunteers at doggy daycare. But they let people make their own choices. It's not like you come in and they say, we think you would just be suited to this. They let people make their own choices of what they want to do. And those were his choices.
Bittersweet is an organization that is dedicated to serving adults with autism. We were founded in 1983. And we are quite unique in two ways. First of all, in 1983, people really didn't understand that there were adults with autism. And secondly, we are based on a farm. We're here on an 80-acre farm, and our whole program is based on the work of our founder, Betty Ruth Kay. Well, our founder and many of our founding parents were probably also founders of the Autism Society of Northwest Ohio. This was the early days in the 1970s, when there were not services and autism was little known. For many years, when Betty started Bittersweet, the Autism Society was very involved in supporting what we were doing and helping to develop the programs. These days, because autism is so much more well known, we work with the Autism Society on a variety of community committees and projects in order to promote the whole idea of awareness and services for people with autism. Advocacy has been something we've worked together on, as well as educating the community. I actually came to work here in 1986 as a social worker and planned to stay for a few months, and look at me, I'm still here. I've been the executive director since 2003. Our day program, we have 58 people who are here during the day, is the program that we see more movement in because people are able to come here and either work or benefit from the habilitation or the therapy that are offered. We also have programs in the community for young adults and adolescents. We call them social living clubs, where for maybe 6 weeks they go and they learn yoga, or right now they're doing bowling. But it's one of our new programs that is focused on adolescents and helping them be more integrated in the community. Typically focus on age 12 and up. Our focus has not been on small children, but it's been on adolescents and then adults. And that's where we feel we have the most impact and the most success. We believe that in meaningful activities. So one of the tenets of our philosophy is that for people with autism to be able to continue to learn, grow, and be engaged, you need to find those things that are meaningful to them. So what's meaningful to one person might not be the same thing that is interesting to another person. So we need a palette of activities. That's the beauty of a farm. Now, you don't need a farm to do this, but it makes it easy. So we have animals. They're therapeutic animals. We do have people that love working with the animals. That is very engaging to them. We have art. Not everyone loves art, but hey, it's there, and we have some people who really gravitate toward it. Horticulture, culinary. We have a groundskeeping crew where that's a lot of good gross motor activity. They mow, they harvest wood from our woods. It's the manly group, I call it, because it's mostly men. But so the farm gives us just so many opportunities to find what's meaningful to each individual.